The train lurched to a violent stop, sending Cordelia Whitmore's carpetbag tumbling across the wooden floor as steam hissed through the car like an angry serpent. She pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, squinting through the December snow at a weathered sign that read Millbrook Station, not Millfield, where her intended husband Jasper Holcomb was supposed to meet her. "This ain't right," she muttered, her breath fogging the glass. The conductor's voice boomed through the car, announcing a 20-minute delay due to a fallen tree across the tracks ahead. 20 minutes in this godforsaken place that looked more like a forgotten corner of creation than a proper town. Cordelia gathered her burgundy traveling dress and stepped onto the platform, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. The bitter wind cut through her wool coat like a blade, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. A handful of ramshackle buildings lined a muddy main street, their windows glowing amber against the darkening sky. This wasn't the prosperous farming community Jasper had described in his letters. She was studying her crumpled correspondence when something tugged insistently at her skirt. Looking down, she found herself staring into the most sorrowful pair of green eyes she'd ever seen. A little girl, no more than 6, with tangled auburn hair escaping from beneath a patched woolen cap. "Please, miss," the child whispered, her small fingers clutching desperately at Cordelia's dress. "Daddy's real sick and I don't know what to do. The medicine man won't come 'cause we ain't got money. And Daddy keeps asking for Mama, but Mama's been gone to heaven for 2 years now." Cordelia's heart clenched. "Child, I'm just passing through. I'm waiting for my train. Please." The girl's voice cracked with desperation. "You look like an angel in that pretty dress. Maybe God sent you. Daddy needs you something fierce." Before Cordelia could protest, the child grabbed her hand with surprising strength and began pulling her down the platform. "My name's Juniper Kincaid, and Daddy's name is Rourke. He's the blacksmith, but he caught the fever 3 days ago, and I've been trying to take care of him, but I'm too little." Cordelia glanced back at the train, its engine still belching smoke into the gray sky. She should stay put, wait for the delay to end, continue on to Millfield and her arranged marriage to a man she'd never met, but who promised security and respectability. That was the sensible thing to do, but Juniper's small hand in hers felt warm and trusting, and something in those pleading eyes reminded her of herself as a child lost, frightened, desperately needing someone to care. Just for a few minutes. She heard herself saying, "Until the train's ready." Juniper's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Thank you, miss. Thank you so much. Daddy's gonna be so happy. He ain't smiled since Mama died, but maybe he will when he sees you." As they hurried through the snow toward a modest cabin with smoke curling from its chimney, Cordelia wondered what she was getting herself into. She was a mail-order bride with her own destination and her own problems. She couldn't afford to get tangled up in the troubles of strangers, no matter how heartrending their circumstances, but Juniper's grip on her hand was like an anchor, and for the first time since boarding that train in Boston 3 days ago, Cordelia felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The cabin's interior hit Cordelia like a wave of chaos and desperation. Unwashed dishes towered in the sink, children's clothing lay scattered across handmade furniture, and the air hung thick with the smell of sickness and wood smoke. But it was the man lying on the narrow bed in the corner that made her breath catch in her throat. Rourke Kincaid was burning with fever, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, his powerful frame reduced to trembling weakness beneath a patchwork quilt. Even in his delirium, she could see he was devastatingly handsome, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, high cheekbones, and when his eyes fluttered open, they were the same startling green as his daughter's. "Mama?" he whispered, reaching out with a shaking hand. "Louisa, is that you?" Juniper climbed onto the bed beside him, her small face crumpled with worry. "No, Daddy. Mama's in heaven, remember? But I brought someone to help." This lady was at the train station, and she's real pretty and kind, just like Mama was. Cordelia set down her carpetbag and approached cautiously. She'd helped her aunt nurse the sick back in Boston, but this man was clearly in the grip of something serious. His skin blazed with heat, and his breathing was shallow and labored. "What's your name, child?" she asked gently, though she already knew. "Juniper," the girl replied. "And this is my daddy, Rourke. He makes horseshoes and wagon wheels and all sorts of things in his shop. He's the strongest man in Millbrook, but the fever's making him weak." Cordelia rolled up her sleeves and touched the back of her hand to Rourke's forehead. The heat radiating from his skin made her wince. "When did this start?" 3 days ago. He was working late in the shop, got caught in that terrible storm we had. Came home soaked to the bone and shivering. By morning he couldn't hardly stand. Through the frosted window, Cordelia could hear her train whistle in the distance, a mournful sound that seemed to mock her predicament. She should be on that train, continuing toward her new life, her arranged marriage, her promise of security. Jasper Holcomb would be waiting at the Millfield station with his buggy and his expectations. But Rourke groaned and shifted restlessly, and Juniper looked at her with such hopeful trust that leaving felt impossible. "I need clean water, lots of it," Cordelia said, surprising herself with the decisiveness in her voice. "And do you have any willow bark? Or at least some clean rags?" Juniper scrambled off the bed. "There's a well out back, and Mama always kept willow bark in the kitchen cupboard for headaches and such." As the child hurried to gather supplies, Cordelia found herself really looking at the cabin for the first time. Despite the current chaos, she could see evidence of love and care in every corner. Hand-carved toys sat on a shelf above the fireplace. A beautiful quilt clearly made with loving hands covered the small bed where Juniper obviously slept. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece, showing happier times when Rourke's smile was bright and a lovely woman with Juniper's eyes stood beside him. You don't have to stay," Rourke mumbled, his fevered gaze focusing on her with effort. "Don't know who you are, but Juniper ... She gets scared when I'm sick. Sorry she bothered you." "She didn't bother me," Cordelia replied, and was startled to realize she meant it. "My name is Cordelia Whitmore, and I'm going to help you get better." Even as she said the words, she could hear her train's whistle growing fainter in the distance. By now, it was probably pulling away from Millbrook Station, carrying her carpetbag and her carefully planned future toward Millfield without her. But looking at this small, broken family, she couldn't bring herself to regret missing it. By midnight, Cordelia had settled into a rhythm of nursing that felt both foreign and natural. She bathed Rourke's fevered skin with cool cloths, spooned willow bark tea between his cracked lips, and spoke to him in low, soothing tones even when he didn't seem to hear her. Juniper had finally fallen asleep in her small bed, exhausted by days of worry and fear. The cabin felt different now, cleaner, more peaceful. Cordelia had spent the evening washing dishes, tidying scattered belongings, and stoking the fire to keep the chill at bay. She told herself she was simply doing what any Christian woman would do, but the truth was more complicated. Every time Rourke's fever spiked and he called out for his dead wife, every time he looked at her with confused gratitude, something shifted inside her chest. "You're not who I thought," he whispered during one of his more lucid moments around 2 a.m. "I keep thinking you're Louisa, but your voice is different, softer." Cordelia wrung out a cloth in the basin of cool water. "I'm Cordelia. I was passing through on the train when Juniper found me. She was very frightened for you, Cordelia." He repeated her name like he was tasting it. "That's a fancy name for these parts. You running from something?" The question caught her off guard. Running to something, actually. "Or I was I'm supposed to marry a man named Jasper Holcomb in Millfield. It was an arrangement made through letters. Rourke's fevered eyes sharpened. Mail order bride. I prefer arranged marriage, she said stiffly, then immediately felt foolish for standing on ceremony with a man burning with fever. Why? He asked simply. The question hung in the air between them. Why had she agreed to marry a stranger? Why? Had she left everything familiar in Boston to travel west to a man who offered security but no promise of love? Why was she sitting here nursing another stranger instead of continuing toward her predetermined fate? Security, she said finally. My aunt died, left me with debts and no family. Jasper promised a good home, respectability, a chance to build something stable. And love? Rourke's voice was barely a whisper. Cordelia's hand stilled on his forehead. Love is a luxury I can't afford. That's the saddest thing I ever heard. Before she could respond, his eyes drifted closed again, and his breathing deepened into what looked like natural sleep rather than fevered unconsciousness. For the first time in 3 days, his skin felt cooler to the touch. She settled back in the wooden chair beside his bed and allowed herself to really look at him. Even sick and exhausted, Rourke Kincaid was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. His hands, lying still on the quilt, were strong and calloused from honest work. His face, relaxed in sleep, showed laugh lines around his eyes and mouth evidence of a man who had known happiness before tragedy struck. What would it be like, she wondered, to be loved by a man like this? To have someone look at her the way he'd obviously looked at his Louisa, with complete devotion and fierce protectiveness? She shook her head, banishing such dangerous thoughts. Rourke Kincaid was a widower with a child and responsibilities she couldn't begin to imagine. She was a woman with her own plans, her own carefully constructed future waiting in Millfield. This was just a temporary detour, a moment of Christian charity before she continued toward her real life. But as she dozed in the chair, keeping vigil through the long night, her dreams were filled with green eyes and strong hands and the sound of a little girl's laughter echoing through a cabin that finally felt like home. When dawn broke through the windows, painting the room in shades of gold and rose, Cordelia woke to find Rourke watching her with clear, fever-free eyes. Angel, he whispered, and this time he knew exactly who she was. A fever broke, Cordelia said softly, pressing her palm to Rourke's forehead to confirm what her eyes already told her. His skin was cool and damp with healthy sweat, his breathing deep and regular. Thanks to you. His voice was hoarse from 3 days of illness, but his green eyes were alert and grateful. Juniper told me what you did. Staying with strangers, missing your train, caring for a man you don't even know. Cordelia felt heat rise in her cheeks. In the golden morning light streaming through the cabin windows, Rourke was even more devastating than she'd realized. His dark hair was tousled from fever sleep, and when he attempted to sit up, she could see the powerful muscles of his chest and shoulders beneath his rumpled nightshirt. Anyone would have done the same, she said, busying herself with tidying the medicine supplies to avoid his intense gaze. No, he said simply. They wouldn't have. Most folks in Millbrook are good people, but they got their own problems. Their own families to worry about. You had every reason to get back on that train and continue to your new husband, but you stayed. Before she could respond, Juniper burst through the cabin door like a small whirlwind, her face glowing with relief. When she saw her father sitting up, "Daddy, you're better. I knew Miss Cordelia would make you well." She launched herself onto the bed, careful not to jostle him too hard. She cleaned everything and made the best soup and told me stories about Boston while you were sleeping. She's been taking care of both of us. Rourke's eyes found Cordelia's over his daughter's head, and something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding that made her pulse quicken dangerously. I should send a telegram to Jasper, she said, though the words felt like dust in her mouth. Let him know I missed the train. Arrange for the next one. Of course, Rourke agreed, but she caught the flash of something disappointment, regret across his features. Though the next train through Millbrook isn't until Thursday, it's only Monday now. 3 more days. The thought should have filled her with frustration, with anxiety about her delayed future. Instead, she felt a treacherous flutter of anticipation. You could stay here, Juniper said hopefully. Daddy's better, but he shouldn't be up and working yet, should he? And I like having another lady around. It gets lonesome sometimes, just me and Daddy. Juniper, Rourke said gently, Miss Cordelia has her own life waiting for her. We can't ask her to. It's not asking if I offer, Cordelia interrupted, surprising herself. I mean, if you need help until you're fully recovered. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Rourke nodded. Just until Thursday, then. But I insist on paying you something for your trouble. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? The question hung in the air like a challenge. What did she want? Security, stability, a respectable marriage to a man she'd never met? Or something else entirely, something that had begun to take shape in her heart during the long night of watching over this broken family? I want ... She began, then stopped, afraid to voice the dangerous thoughts swirling through her mind. She wants to be happy, Juniper announced with the devastating honesty of childhood. I can tell. She gets the same look Daddy gets sometimes. When he thinks I'm not watching, like she's remembering something good that went away. Cordelia felt tears prick her eyes. From the mouths of babes, Rourke reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and gentle around hers. Then, stay, he said quietly. Stay and let us take care of you for once, instead of you taking care of everyone else. Looking down at their joined hands, Cordelia felt the last of her carefully constructed plans begin to crumble. She was supposed to be practical, sensible, focused on building a secure future. She wasn't supposed to fall for a widowed blacksmith and his motherless daughter in a tiny town that didn't even appear on most maps. But as Juniper snuggled between them and Rourke's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, Cordelia realized that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never planned for. At all. Tuesday morning brought a fresh snowfall that blanketed Millbrook in pristine white, making the little town look like something from a fairy tale. Cordelia stood at the kitchen window, watching Rourke split firewood behind the cabin with smooth, powerful strokes. His color had returned completely, and though she'd scolded him about overdoing it, she couldn't help but admire the way his muscles moved beneath his flannel shirt. He's getting stronger, Juniper observed, appearing at her elbow with a wooden doll clutched in her arms. Mama always said Daddy was too stubborn to stay sick for long. Tell me about your mama, Cordelia said gently, settling into a chair by the window. Over the past 2 days, she'd grown to adore this precocious little girl, but Juniper rarely spoke about her mother except in passing. Juniper climbed into her lap, a gesture that never failed to make Cordelia's heart squeeze with unexpected tenderness. Her name was Louisa May Kincaid, and she had hair like sunshine and eyes like spring grass. Daddy says I look just like her, but I think I got his stubborn chin. She touched her small jaw thoughtfully. Mama could sing like an angel, and she made the best apple pie in 3 counties. She taught me to sew and braid flowers and say my prayers. But then she got sick with a lung fever, and no matter how hard Daddy tried to make her better, she went to heaven anyway. Cordelia's arms tightened around the child. That must have been very hard for you and your daddy. It was. Daddy didn't talk for weeks after the funeral. Just worked in his shop from dawn to dark and forgot to eat. I had to remind him about meals and washing and changing his clothes. Mrs. Patterson from the general store brought food for a while, but she stopped humming when Daddy wouldn't talk to nobody. Through the window, Cordelia watched Rourke pause in his work to wipe sweat from his brow despite the cold air. Even from this distance, she could see the grief that still haunted his features, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. The careful guard he kept around his heart. Do you think he'd be upset if someone else cared about him? She asked carefully. Juniper twisted in her lap to look at her with those wise green eyes. You mean like how you care about him? Cordelia's cheeks burned. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. You get all soft and worried when you look at him, and you smile different when he's around. And Daddy ... Well, he actually smiles now, which he ain't done since Mama died. He watches you when he thinks nobody's looking, and yesterday I heard him humming while he worked. Before Cordelia could respond, the cabin door opened and Rourke stepped inside, bringing the scent of winter air and wood smoke with him. Getting cold out there, he said, stomping snow from his boots. Should be enough firewood to last through the week now. You shouldn't be working so hard, Cordelia scolded, rising from her chair. You were near death 3 days ago. I'm fine, he insisted, but she noticed the way he moved carefully, still favoring his left side where the fever had settled in his chest. Sit down. I'll make coffee. Something in her tone brooked no argument, and to her surprise, Rourke obeyed. As she bustled around the kitchen, she was acutely aware of his eyes following her movements. The domestic intimacy of the moment preparing coffee for a man while his daughter played nearby struck her with devastating clarity. This was what she'd never allowed herself to dream of, not just security or respectability, but belonging. Being part of a family that needed her as much as she needed them. Cordelia, Rourke said quietly as she set a steaming mug before him, we need to talk about Thursday. Her hand stilled on the coffee pot. Thursday. The train. Jasper Holcomb waiting. In Millfield with his promises of stability and his carefully written letters. I know, she whispered. I won't ask you to stay, he continued, his voice carefully controlled. You got plans, commitments. A man waiting for you who can probably give you things I never could. But I need you to know. He paused, struggling, with words that seemed too big for the small cabin. These past few days with you here, it's like the sun came back after the longest winter. Juniper's laughing again, and I'm remembering what it feels like to hope for something more than just getting through each day. Cordelia's eyes filled with tears. Rourke. I'm not asking for promises, he said quickly. I just needed you to know that you changed something here, changed us. And whatever you decide, we'll be grateful for the gift of knowing you. Juniper, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, suddenly stood up and moved to stand between them. But what if she doesn't want to go? The little girl asked with devastating simplicity. What if she wants to stay with us and be part of our family? Would that be okay, Daddy? The question hung in the air like a prayer, and Cordelia realized that everything she'd ever wanted was sitting right here in this humble cabin, waiting for her to be brave enough to reach for it. Wednesday evening arrived with the weight of impending decision, and Cordelia found herself unable to sit still. She'd spent the day helping Rourke in his blacksmith shop, marveling at his skill as he shaped hot metal into beautiful, useful things. Juniper had appointed herself as assistant, fetching tools and chattering happily as her father worked. It had felt like playing house, like trying on a life that fit her better than any dress she'd ever worn. Now, as twilight painted the sky purple and gold, they sat around the kitchen table sharing a supper of venison stew and fresh biscuits. The domesticity of it, the three of them together like a real family, made Cordelia's heart ache with longing. Tell us about this Jasper fellow, Rourke said suddenly, his tone carefully neutral as he buttered a biscuit for Juniper, Cordelia's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. What do you want to know? What's he like? What made you choose him? She set down her spoon, considering. I didn't choose him, exactly. He advertised in a Boston newspaper for a wife. Said he was a successful merchant in Millfield, owned property, could provide a comfortable home for the right woman. But what's he like? Juniper pressed. Is he handsome? Is he funny? Does he like children? I don't know. The admission felt shameful somehow. We only corresponded through letters. He wrote about his business, his house, his need for a wife to help with entertaining customers and managing his household. Very practical things. Rourke's jaw tightened. He never asked what you wanted. What made you happy? That's not how these arrangements work, Cordelia said defensively. It's about compatibility, shared goals, building a stable life together. Romances. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Romance is what, exactly? Rourke's voice was dangerously quiet. A luxury I can't afford. She repeated the words she'd spoken to him during his fever, but they sounded hollow now, unconvincing even to her own ears. Horseshit, Rourke said bluntly, causing Juniper to giggle and earning a sharp look from Cordelia. Language. She scolded automatically. Sorry, Junebug. But it is horseshit, Cordelia. You're a beautiful, intelligent, caring woman who deserves to be loved completely, not just utilized by some merchant who needs a business partner in petticoats. The passion in his voice made her breath catch. You don't understand. I understand that you're scared, he interrupted, reaching across the table to capture her hand. I understand that you think security is more important than happiness because you've never had anyone show you that you can have both. And you think you can? The words slipped out before she could stop them, laced with more vulnerability than she'd intended to reveal. Rourke's green eyes blazed. I think I could spend the rest of my life trying to prove it to you. The air in the cabin seemed to crackle with electricity. Juniper looked between them with wide eyes, as if sensing the magnitude of the moment. But I have nothing to offer you, Cordelia whispered. No dowry, no connections, no special skills. You have everything, Rourke said. Fiercely. You saved my life, brought light back into this house, made my daughter smile again. You've worked beside me in the shop like we've been partners for years. You've turned this cabin into a home again just by being in it. The train comes tomorrow morning, she said weakly. I know. He lifted their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. And I'll drive you to the station myself if that's what you choose. But don't choose Jasper Holcomb because you think you don't deserve better. Don't choose security over love because you're afraid to take a risk on happiness. Juniper suddenly pushed back from the table and ran to the mantelpiece, returning with a small wooden box. Mama left this for Daddy, she announced, setting it between them. She made him promise not to open it until he found someone else to. Love, I think it's time. Rourke stared at the box as if it might bite him. Juniper ... Mama told me before she died that she wanted you to be happy again someday, the little girl said solemnly. She said love doesn't get used up when you give it away, it just grows bigger. And she liked Miss Cordelia before she even met her. How could she like me before she met me? Cordelia asked, bewildered. Juniper smiled. Because she asked God to send someone special to take care of us when she couldn't anymore. And God sent you. With trembling hands, Rourke opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, lay a simple gold wedding band and a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it with reverent care and read aloud, My darling Rourke, if you're reading this, it means you've found someone worth loving again. Don't feel guilty for moving forward. Feel grateful that God blessed you twice with true love. Give her this ring and tell her she has my blessing to make you and our Juniper happy. All my love, always, Louisa. Cordelia's tears fell freely now, and she saw her own emotion reflected in Rourke's eyes. Well? Juniper demanded impatiently. Are you going to ask her proper, or do I have to do everything myself? Despite the emotional intensity of the moment, Rourke laughed a rich, joyful sound that transformed his entire face. He slid from his chair and dropped to one knee beside Cordelia's chair, taking the ring from the box. "Cordelia Whitmore," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know we've only known each other 4 days, but they've been the best 4 days of my life since Louisa died. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make Juniper giggle. I love how you look in my kitchen and how naturally you fit into our lives. Will you marry me? Will you let us love you the way you deserve to be loved?" Looking down at this beautiful, broken, hopeful man at the ring that represented not competition with a ghost, but inclusion in a legacy of love, Cordelia realized that sometimes the biggest risk wasn't taking a chance on the unknown, but settling for less than everything your heart desired. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, absolutely yes." As he slipped Louisa's ring onto her finger, Cordelia finally understood the difference between being chosen for convenience and being chosen for love. Part 7. 6 months later, the June sun streamed through the windows of the little cabin that had become Cordelia's sanctuary and joy. She stood at the kitchen counter, her hands covered in flour as she rolled out pie dough, listening to the sound of Rourke's hammer ringing from the blacksmith shop and Juniper's laughter as she played in the garden. The gold band on her finger caught the light as she worked, and she paused to admire it, not just the ring itself, but everything it represented. She was no longer Cordelia Whitmore, the desperate woman who'd climbed aboard a train to marry a stranger for security. She was Cordelia Kincaid, beloved wife and mother, integral part of a family that chose her every single day. The transformation hadn't been without its challenges. 3 weeks after their hasty wedding ceremony performed by the circuit preacher with half of Millbrook in attendance, Jasper Holcomb had arrived in town, demanding to know why his mail order bride had failed to appear. Cordelia had been terrified to face him, but Rourke had stood beside her as she explained her decision with quiet dignity. To her surprise, Jasper had been more relieved than angry. "Truth is," he'd admitted, "I was having second thoughts myself. Seemed like a cold way to start a marriage, through letters and arrangements. I hope you'll be happy here, Mrs. Kincaid." And happy she was, in ways she'd never dreamed possible. Rourke loved her with a fierce tenderness that took her breath away, showing her daily that she was cherished not for what she could provide, but for who she was. Juniper had blossomed under the attention of a mother figure, and the three of them had settled into routines that felt both natural and miraculous. "Something smells like heaven in here," Rourke's voice rumbled behind her, and she felt his arms circle her waist as he pressed a kiss to the back of her neck. "Apple pie," she said, leaning back against his solid chest. "Juniper's been begging for it all week, and I finally found time to make one. You spoil us. You spoil me right back." She turned in his arms, not caring that she was getting flour on his shirt. "Mrs. Patterson asked me again today if I'd consider helping her expand the general store. She thinks with more women settling in the area, there's a market for ladies' goods and fancy items." Rourke's eyes lit up. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd talk to my husband about it." She smiled up at him. "What do you think? Could you handle having a wife in business?" "I think," he said, capturing her face in his hands, "that I could handle anything as long as you're by my side. Besides, I've seen how smart you are with numbers and people. You'd probably run the most successful store in 3 counties. Before she could respond, Juniper burst through the door, her dress dusty from playing outside and her hair escaping from its braids. "Mama Cordelia! Daddy, come quick. There's a lady at the train station who looks just like you did that first day, all fancy and scared and carrying a carpet bag." Cordelia and Rourke exchanged glances. Another mail-order bride? She wondered. Aloud, "Probably," Rourke agreed. "Question is, Did she get off at the right stop or the wrong one? They walked hand in hand to the train station, Juniper skipping ahead of them. Sure enough, a young woman with auburn hair and a traveling dress stood on the platform, consulting a letter with a bewildered expression. She looked up as they approached, hope and uncertainty warring in her brown eyes. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I'm looking for Pine Ridge. I'm supposed to meet my intended husband there, but the conductor says there's no such place on this route." Cordelia felt her heart clench with recognition and sympathy. "What's your name, dear?" "Violet Morrison." "I'm to marry a Mr. Cornelius Ashford. He owns a logging operation and needs a wife to help manage his household." She paused, then added with painful honesty, "It's all arranged through letters. I've never actually met him." Rourke squeezed Cordelia's hand gently. "Pine Ridge is about 50 miles north," he said kindly. "But the stagecoach doesn't run there until Monday. Today's Friday." Violet's face fell. "Oh, I don't have money for a hotel and I don't know anyone here." Juniper, who had been listening with the intense focus she brought to all adult conversations, suddenly grabbed Violet's free hand. "You should stay with us. We got room and Mama Cordelia knows all about being scared and far from home. She'd take good care of you." "Juniper," Cordelia said gently, but her eyes were warm with pride at her daughter's generous heart. "Please," Juniper continued earnestly. "Mama Cordelia was just like you when I found her all dressed up and worried about meeting a stranger. But look how happy she is now. Maybe we can help you figure out what you really want too." Violet looked between them, clearly overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. "I couldn't impose. It's not imposing," Cordelia said firmly, remembering her own desperate moment on this very platform. "It's what neighbors do for each other. Besides, I think Juniper's right. Sometimes getting off at the wrong stop is exactly where you need to be." As they walked back toward the cabin, Violet's carpetbag in Rourke's strong hands and Juniper chattering excitedly about all the things they could do over the weekend, Cordelia marveled at the strange circular beauty of life. 6 months ago, she had been the lost, frightened woman with nowhere to go. Now she was the one offering sanctuary, the one with a home and family to share. That evening, as they sat around the expanded dinner table, Violet looking overwhelmed, but grateful, Juniper regaling their guest with stories of how her parents had met, and Rourke quietly ensuring everyone had enough to eat, Cordelia felt a deep sense of completeness settle over her. After Juniper had been tucked into bed and Violet had retired to the small guest room they'd hastily prepared, Cordelia and Rourke sat together on their front porch, watching fireflies dance in the warm summer air. "Do you think she'd go through with it?" Rourke asked, his arm around Cordelia's shoulders. "This arranged marriage to the logging man?" "I don't know," Cordelia replied thoughtfully. "She seemed even more uncertain than I was, if that's possible. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that she have a few days to breathe. To see that there are other possibilities in the world. Like you did? Like we all do, when someone shows us kindness at exactly the right moment." She leaned into his warmth, still amazed by how perfectly she fit against his side. "Juniper was right, you know. Getting off at the wrong stop was the best mistake I ever made." "Not a mistake," Rourke corrected gently. "Destiny. That little girl of ours has always believed in magic, and maybe she's right. Maybe some things are just meant to be." 3 days later, they stood once again at the train station. But this time, Violet Morrison wasn't boarding the stagecoach to Pine Ridge. Instead, she was climbing aboard the eastbound train, her eyes bright with newfound determination. "I'm going back to Chicago," she announced to them, her voice stronger than it had been when she'd arrived. "I have a cousin there who's always said I could work in her dress shop. I realized I was running toward marriage because I was afraid to try anything else. But after talking with you, Cordelia, I think I'd rather try building something of my own first." She pressed a hastily written letter into Cordelia's hands. "Would you mail this to Mr. Ashford? I've explained that I won't be coming, and I've returned the money he sent for my train ticket." As the train pulled away, taking Violet toward her own uncertain but chosen future, Juniper tugged on Cordelia's skirt. "Did we help her?" the little girl asked anxiously. "Did we do the right thing?" Cordelia knelt down to meet her daughter's worried gaze. "We gave her what someone once gave me: time to think, a safe place to stay, and the knowledge that she had choices. What she does with those things is up to her, but yes, sweetheart, we did exactly the right thing." Later that night, as she lay in bed beside her sleeping husband, Cordelia thought about the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She'd set out to find security and had discovered love instead. She'd planned to become a merchant's wife and had become a blacksmith's partner. She'd expected to manage someone else's household and had instead found her own home. Most miraculous of all, she'd thought she was rescuing a fevered man and his frightened daughter, only to discover that they had been the ones to rescue her. The open window, she could hear the distant sound of the night train passing through Millbrook, carrying other hopeful souls toward unknown destinations. Some of them would find exactly what they were looking for. Others, like her, would find something infinitely better than what they'd planned. But all of them, she realized with a smile, would have the chance to discover that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with getting off at the wrong. Stop and having a little girl grab your dress and say, "Daddy needs you." Rourke stirred beside her, unconsciously pulling her closer in his sleep, and Cordelia closed her eyes, grateful beyond measure for the day she'd stepped off that train and into the life she was always meant to live. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make, a blacksmith shop to help run, maybe even plans to discuss about expanding into the general store business. There would be Juniper's laughter and Rourke's gentle kisses and the quiet satisfaction of a life built on love instead of mere survival. But for now, wrapped in the arms of the man who had taught her that she deserved to be cherished, surrounded by the peace of the home they'd built together, Cordelia Kincaid was exactly where she belonged. And if another lost soul happened to step off the train at Millbrook Station tomorrow, well, they'd have a warm meal waiting and a little girl ready to grab their hand and lead them toward whatever destiny was waiting in the wings. After all, the best love stories always began with someone brave enough to help a stranger find their way home.